What we have here is a brand new in the box At Games Legends Pinball HD, and I'm going to put that together, and I'm going to install this Scepter 2K 144 Hertz monitor in using the Buy Stuff Arcade's Playfield upgrade kit, and I'm going to show you how. Okay, got it here on its legs. I'm going to leave the back box off for the time being, so it's just easier for visuals. The mod could be done with the back box still installed, but for as easy as it is to take them off, it's a bit easier to work around. So I'm going to take the lock bars off, the control panel off, and we will show you from there. And no, I'm not going to power it up and turn it on before I take it apart. Let's take the glass off next. And there are the 4 screws on the corners to remove the bezel off the screen. So lifting up and sliding forward will let the screen and bezel come forward, and then we can tip that up. And the stock cross piece just came right apart. That was pretty cool. Remove this tape. Undo the clips. And remove. And the backlight power plugs into the back of the power supply. I'm going to take that out as well. So this piece here is supposed to be attached between the 2 plastic brackets. You can see that the screws just slipped right through the holes, and that came apart as I was tipping the monitor up. So that doesn't need to be there, because we are going to next remove the inside brackets and these rails from both sides of the cabinet. Disassembly complete. Yeah, tell me I'm doing a good job. I'm also, while I have everything wide open, going to add a hole in the bottom of the cab, which is going to be used to run our DisplayPort cables through to a switcher here, which is going to be mounted underneath the front of the cab so it can be switched during OTG mode switching. So we need to have access to the switch. It's going to be mounted to the bottom of the front of the cab, and in order to run the 3 DisplayPort and USB cables to it, we need a hole in the bottom of the cab right about here. So I'm going to make a 1-inch hole. I would recommend making it at least 1 inch in diameter because some of these DisplayPort connectors are fairly fat, and we need to feed 3 of them one at a time, feed 3 of them through that hole and not get them stuck. So I'm going to make that right here. Anyone who's drilled a hole saw through MDF, you can learn quickly that you want to drill halfway through from one side and then drill from the other side to finish the hole instead of blowing out the one side on the bottom. You could use a spade bit for this as well, probably again from both sides. There's auger bits. I like my hole saws, and we'll try to make as clean as possible a hole here. Okay, as you can see here, since the last clip, I've taken the time just to install the Buy Stuff Arcade's ALP haptics kit. We'll have a link in the description for that. There's some instructional videos. One of them by Wagner, who did a great job on the install and testing. It has a whole instructable for that, so I'm not going to get into that. You can see how there's one exciter mounted there and a second exciter there on the left side, and there's the amplifier mounted here underneath, and you can see how I've done a bass shaker under there. So the next steps that I'm going to show, I just want to clarify this. The cabling is different depending on if this mod is going to be just done as a PC only conversion for your ALP. What we've got here, I've got a DisplayPort switch, and some of the other cabling that I'm going to go over right now is in order to be able to use the ALP still with the stock motherboard and also OTG, and to be able to switch back and forth without being blind when you're doing it. So this will allow the new 2K monitor to play the stock games. Now, we've said earlier that you do need the 2.6 version of the ALP motherboard for this in order to do that. If you are doing a PC only mod, then it's very simple, because all you're going to be doing is mounting that monitor and plugging the DisplayPort or HDMI directly into your PC. The difficulty with that, though, is that you do need to convert all of your buttons and plunger into a different encoder, because you cannot use those without them being encoded to USB to send directly to your PC as well. So there's other products out there for that. This mod and the details I'm going to get into right now allow you to use the stock controls setup. You still need an operating 2.6 motherboard, but then we have switches and splitters to be able to use both OTG and stock on this machine. So as we go forward here, I'm going to go through the cabling for that OTG stock motherboard conversion. So what I have here in my hand is a DisplayPort bidirectional switch. So I'm going to be installing that up underneath the front of the machine under here. I'm going to be running DisplayPort cables and a USB power connection to that as well through this hole that I'm also already used for my haptics install. The other thing I hadn't mentioned yet was that I'm powering the haptics also from a power brick that I've tied into this switched on power, just using a Y cable here. So that's going to still power my monitor. I've teed off of that to power my haptics kit as well. So the whole thing's, again, all very optional and how you want to wire this up. But just to explain that's what I'm doing here in order to have the whole machine turn on and off with the main power switch. So I'm going to go ahead and install those cables and this DisplayPort switch, and I'll show from underneath then how that looks, and then we will move into installing the mount kit. So you can see here I've mounted the DisplayPort switch. We're going to be using it with 2 inputs and 1 output. So the output DisplayPort will be going directly to the Playfield monitor. So that's a DisplayPort to DisplayPort cable here. So I'm going to feed that up through the hole. And save that for later. Plug into the Playfield. The end of that will then plug into the output here. I get it the right way. This way. There is a USB-C power cable for that switch. I'm going to plug that in as well here. And that's going to feed up through the hole. And that'll run back to a USB hub that we'll be installing when we get around to the back panel. This cable here, included with the kit, is a DisplayPort to HDMI, or actually HDMI to DisplayPort cable. So this will be the input to the switch from the motherboard, and we're gonna, again, from the back, you'll see the install of the LVDS to HDMI board that is mounted on the back panel. So I'm going to just plug this into DisplayPort 1 input. And then I need to obviously feed that in up from the bottom because we have the converter block. And that has double-sided tape installed, so I can stick that again to the bottom of the ALP so it's not hanging down. So the display port input 2 will be a cable directly from your PC. So that I'm not going to feed that through the hole. I'm going to have my PC sitting on the floor underneath the machine where it can be accessed. So we're going to just leave that out. We're going to plug it in here. We'll tie it up to the bottom of the machine so it's not pulling on the connection. And it could be run, if you have a longer one, through the hole and out the back as well. But again, for our purposes, the PC is going to be sitting here on the floor. So we're going to keep this cable shorter and run it directly there. I'm going to go ahead and move to the back of the machine. You'll notice that with this kit, it comes with a replacement back panel, and it's all pre-drilled and set up for mounting some of the hardware we need. So I'm going to remove the stock back panel that comes with the machine, and then I'm going to swap the lock and the hardware onto the new one, as well as install the electronics hardware that we need. I'm going to go ahead and remove the lock and the bracket from the stock panel. I'm also going to install an HDMI splitter on the outside of that panel using the bracket that comes with the kit. On the inside of the panel, I'm going to go ahead and install posts, and then the HDMI LVDS to HDMI converter board on those posts here, as well as install a zip tie down on this hole so that we can retain the HDMI cable. You'll notice that the replacement panel comes with a hole drilled for the cables that need to come out through the back of the ALP. So you'll notice the lock, the key only is removable in one position of the lock, so you want to maintain that position when you replace it to the other one, and make it so you can actually remove the lock when it's locked. So I'm going to leave the key in it just so I can keep the orientation correct while I swap that over. I lost my nut. With the HDMI splitter I'm going to install here, I'm going to put the USB port side and the input side towards the hole, because those are the cables that are going to be going through there. Now on the flip side, got our nylon posts, and they'll fit right in those holes. And use the nylon screws to hold that on. And install the cable tie down. Okay, I'm back here at the back of the machine. Here's my new back panel. I've got the USB cable plugged into the HDMI splitter in order to power it. So I've just threaded that through the hole already, because we're going to plug that into the USB hub that we're going to mount just inside. See, the ports are on this side. So I'm going to take the sticky tape. I'm just going to press that here onto the back panel beside the main board. So I'm going to plug that into the main board. I'm going to unplug the current USB cable. Now this cable runs to the front of the cabinet, which is for the joystick panel. Now if you're just using the D-pad panel, this won't do anything, but we may eventually use an upgraded panel control panel on this one. So we're going to plug that into one of these ports on the hub. So we have the power connection just to power that splitter. It makes it much more reliable, even though it sometimes works without. It almost always works properly when it's powered. So I'm going to plug that USB into the hub. And then the third USB is the power connection for the DisplayPort switcher that's mounted up front. So this cable runs back through the hole to the back of the machine, and I'm going to plug that in to the hub as well. And there's our USB. Here's the HDMI to DisplayPort converter cable. Runs to the DisplayPort switch at the front. This HDMI plug end of the cable will be plugging into our LVDS adapter board. I'm going to plug that in there, and I'm going to restrain it right away here on the cable tie so that it doesn't tug the wrong way. So the LVDS cable that used to go to the Playfield panel is here, connected to the main board. So I'm going to remove the ground strap and unplug this cable. Gently. Notice the red is on the right on that cable. Then I'm going to install this cable with the two rectangular ends, red on the right. Plug that into the LVDS port. Press it in there firmly to make sure it snaps all the way onto the pins. Let's place the ground screw. And then install, you notice it has a little arrow there on the right again, so red on this end is also on the right. Slide that over the pins. Carefully and firmly press those on. So the haptics and things like that can also, some of that work needs to be done with this back panel open, but for this project, that's the extent of what we need to do back here. I'm going to hook that on, close the lock, and our new back panel. I'm going to prep the monitor here for installation. Kit comes with two blocks. One's a 75 by 75 VESA pattern, which is what we're going to use here. There's also 100 by 100 for other monitor. So now my block will sit flat all the way down on those posts. Now before I install that, you'll notice there's carve outs on the inside. So we're going to use these carriage bolts with a spline on them, and we're going to insert them in there. Use one of our wing nuts. Tighten that, pull the spline into the hole, and these bolts are just used as locator bolts for the slot in the frame, the mount frame. I'll tighten that down to the bottom so that's sitting flush, and then remove it. Do the same for the second one. So that block is going to sit in the monitor. The posts are going to be vertical to the orientation of the screen. Kit also comes with M4 by 35 millimeter screws for attaching this block. Typically that's a pretty good length for a lot of monitors. If you need something different, longer or shorter for those screw holes or different diameter, then you can find them on whatever size you need on Amazon or your local hardware store. I'm going to attach that block. Attach that block using those four. That should be good. So for illustrative purposes, I've also got the LG monitor
here that I've experimented with. It has 100 by 100 VESA mount on the back, so for that I'll just demonstrate how we're going to install the 100 by 100 mount. Same idea exactly as the 75 by 75. Pull those carriage bolts in there so the splines seat in the holes, and this will just fit on there. There's nothing here interfering, so it'll sit right on there. I decided I'm also going to include the M4 by 30 pan head screws along with the kit. This monitor will just not quite take the 35s. They're just a gnat sticky too long, so I'm going to put that on with the M4 by 30s. Just attached just like that. So the rest of the install will be all the same. You notice the input ports here are in a slightly different location. The mount design is as such so that most monitors will allow for these plugs to clear the mount when it's all in. So I also have an MSI monitor here. Same idea, 100 by 100. That block would just go in there the same way. That one worked well with the M4 by 30 screws as well. Here is the bracket and screws. So these are the 4 brackets that will be mounted to those holes, either 2 or 3 of them. We're going to reuse some of the wood screws that came out of the plastic brackets that we took off, and then here's a few of the M4 by 10 millimeter for attaching the upper brackets. So I'm going to attach the kit brackets using the holes that were used for the cross brace that we removed. This cabinet has wood screws down at the bottom bracket, but it had threaded inserts up here on the top. I've got the M4 by 10 screws in the kit to use in there. Some cabinets would have wood screws there. The earliest cabinet had a lot of wood for the bezel and stuff. We'll have an addendum on this video eventually for when I get into that to see if there's anything different that needs doing. But for the time being, I'm going to attach this bracket using 2 of the 1/2-inch wood screws that I removed from this plastic bracket that held the screen in place. So I'm going to just attach. I'm going to attach this bracket and leave the screws loose so that it can still slide back and forth on the slots. I'll attach the upper one using the M4 by 10 screws. Again, leaving them loose yet. So I'm going to pull the plastic bracket we took off back out of the pile, and you'll notice it has these 2 tabs that were located around the cross brace that we removed. So I'm just going to use that to locate these brackets. So if I put it back into where the pins fit into the holes in the side of the cabinet, you will see that those tabs are right on either side of the bracket. So I'm just going to center that bracket up between those tabs and then tighten it into place. And I'll do the same for the upper one. And that locates our brackets right in the right spot. I'm going to take that out and I'm going to repeat the same process on the other side. Okay, so here's the mount frame. I'm going to prep that for going in. Notice I have the 2.5-inch bolt and the wing nut. I'm going to thread that wing nut down facing that direction. to the bottom of the bolt here. I'm going to thread that bolt in from the bottom of the mount. Notice the flange of the T-nut is facing up. I'm going to thread that in, so about 3/4 of an inch sticking out, and I'm going to repeat that for all 4. So all 4 bolts are in. So this mount will fit right in on top of the brackets. You may have to pull the sides apart a little bit, slide it past the heads of the screws. It'll sit down. These holes should line up with the plastic inserts in the bracket. And then I'm going to put screws in there. If they need a little adjustment to mate with the holes, then I can loosen that screw, move the bracket a little bit, and tighten all 4 screws into the plastic nuts in the brackets. Okay, so we're all ready for the screen to be installed. We've got the plastic feet. We're going to set one of those on every leveling bolt here. And I'm going to bring the screen over, set it on the edge right now. Plug in the power cable. Plug in the display port cable. So I unplugged the power cable from this monitor while it was on, so I don't have to reach the power button again to cycle power. It'll turn on and look for a signal as soon as it gets power from the cabinet, because that's how we've got this plumbed in, if you recall. So now I can just set this down so that these 2 posts will line up with this center slot and drop it into place. You see how this slides back and forth now, and then we'll use that to center it up once we put the bezel on. I've put the original LCD panel up here on the table. You can see what we need to do is salvage this bezel from it, because we're going to reuse that. So in order to remove the panel from that bezel, I'm just going to flip it over. There's a number of screws to remove. So we've got brackets here attached. We're going to just take that. These can actually stay in. That'll come off at the panel. I'm going to take these 4 screws off this metal bracket at either end. That panel should remove. And I'm just left with what we want, which is the plastic bezel. So you notice on this bezel there are some protrusions sticking out, which won't be a problem for most monitors except for along the right edge, which would be the bottom edge of the new monitor we've installed. So I'm going to test fit that and see what we need to do. We may need to just cut these little posts off so that it clears underneath and we can center the monitor inside the bezel properly. So we've got our bezel. We've got a few interference problems as a rule with just putting it on top of a monitor as opposed to the LCD panel that it came off of. So you can see on the bottom there are some little protrusions and screw holes here and here, and even these little horizontal tabs that were used to center the panel. We're going to remove all the protrusions all the way around because they just kind of interfere in sliding it up underneath the top edge here, getting it to fit more easily. But I'm also going to remove all of the horizontal tabs just from the right side where it has to go over here. I don't want it interfering with being able to center the monitor back and left to right. So there, I noticed there is markings on this bezel. There's a left side and a right side. So I flip that over. That would be the left over there. I haven't figured out how it's not symmetrical and can go either way, but there is a left and a right on here. So I'm going to trim all these tabs all the way around the protrusions, and these little tabs I'm going to cut off of, which is now also the left side. They are symmetrical. They're both left sides. This one says left and this one says right though. So right is right here, which will be right over there. This is the right side. So I'm just going to use side cutters. It's an easy way to get a flush trim off of these plastic pieces. I'll go around and cut all the Okay, I'm pretty happy with that. You want the edge of the bezel to be even with the edge of the control panel here, and then the glass will fit right in there. And then of course the locking bars will hold it all down. So I'm going to clean this screen up and the glass up. I'm going to set the glass on, and then I'm going to level it all up. Okay, glass is in. Now you can see how the screen is sitting on the mount, but we're below the level that the glass needs to be for the lock bars to come over. So you're going to reach in to each corner where I have those leveling screws, and if I tighten them up and just raise up each corner until the glass is level. You may need to do it in a few stages because pushing one up may push the other down. And make sure the wing nuts are out of the way so that you can get to the height you need to. See how that glass is now nearly level. Then I'm going to lock up the lock nuts. Nothing to shake down or move at all. Replace the control panel. I'm just going to put the D-pad one back on here for now. We can always change that later. That sets in right on the glass. And I can put the lock bars back on. Nobody would ever know. So we're going to put the back box on and connect the PC up here and fire this bad boy up and see what happens. Okay, you can see that we've got one of our back boxes installed here. The Vibs board installed as well as the DMD. If you're using the stock ALP back box for this, which this is
pretty necessary upgrade. I'm not going to recommend just putting it on a stock ALP, but the connections are all the same as far as VIBs goes. The only additional connection we have is to DMD from our PC. So you can see I've got the PC as well down here. I've already connected the DisplayPort cable that runs to the front to the DisplayPort switch. I've also plugged in the audio cable for the haptics kit that we talked about installing before. The other connections we have here is the HDMI cable that is going to go to the input of the HDMI splitter. So I'll plug that in. The two outputs to that splitter, the lower output, we're going to plug into the OTG input to the back box. You see we've got our flat cables here under the back box, so that's plugged into the front OTG HDMI port of the ALP. So I'm going to plug that into the second port. The first port will have the VIBs input. So I've got a cable here for that, and that plugs into the VIBs input. So that's our splitter. I've got the USB power cable which runs inside into the hub. We also have an HDMI cable from the PC for our third screen. So that's for the DMD, the way we've got this set up. So I'm going to plug that in the back box HDMI board. That's going to go there. What I'm going to do later would be tie all these down nicely and retain them. The final cable is the USB cable from the PC, and that's going to plug into this USB port that also runs to the OTG USB port on the front of the machine. So that's we can get our controls from the ALP controlling the PC for future pinball and VPX and stuff. So other than the power cable yet for the ALP, we have it all plugged in. Power cable for the monitor can run through this hole. What I've done is actually powered it internally, but for most people who don't want to get into splicing wires, there will be then a monitor power cable that will also go through this hole in the back panel. Okay, we're ready to power up and see what happens. We're booting up into the Legends. That'll be the stock motherboard running the stock menu and controls when it boots up. And there we have it. We can pick one of our favorite games.
Quit talking and start chalking. Horseshoe extra ball round.
Okay, so I'm going to boot up my PC. Got a signal on our DMD screen. I'm going to switch to OTG, and I can navigate down to OK. And now I hit my DisplayPort switch button. So we've got PC on the main playfield. And then I hit my VIBs button. So I switched to VIBs, and now I'm going to launch Pinup Popper. Here we go. So now I can navigate through Pinup Popper. Find our favorite games.
Back to the future.
Time multi-ball. Time jackpot.